My name is Lauren Whitmore. I'm 29 years old. And the strange thing about the moment your life quietly begins to fall apart is that it never announces itself. There's no thunder, no screaming, no single dramatic moment where everything shatters at once. Sometimes, it starts with silence. 3 days ago, I was standing outside my wedding venue, watching the sky turn that soft golden color that only shows up at the end of perfect days. The kind of light photographers chase. The kind of light people remember. My husband, Daniel, was inside with his groomsmen, laughing about something I couldn't hear through the glass doors. I should have been with my bridesmaids. I should have been thinking about champagne, music, and the rest of my life. Instead, I was staring at my phone. Because it had just buzzed. And what I saw on the screen didn't make sense. You have been removed from Whitmore Family Holdings. No explanation. No warning. Just gone. At first, I thought it was a mistake. It had to be. Maybe my dad tapped something wrong. Or Caleb, my younger brother, was messing around with permissions again. He'd always treated the business systems like a toy he didn't fully understand. I even smiled a little at the thought, because it was easier than thinking anything else. But when I tapped the notification, nothing opened. The group chat, 8 years of messages, updates, holidays, decisions, was just gone. Like it had never existed. And that's when something shifted. Not loudly. Just enough for me to notice the absence. They weren't there. Not my father. Not my mother. Not Caleb. Not even Mark, who had confirmed his +1 3 separate times. Their table inside the reception hall was empty. 4 chairs, perfectly arranged, untouched. Like placeholders for people who had decided not to exist. Hey, are they running late? Daniel's voice was gentle, careful. He had already noticed. Of course he had. He always noticed. I forced a small shrug, slipping my phone into my clutch like it hadn't just rewritten reality. Probably traffic, I said. Even I could hear how thin it sounded. The staff kept checking in. The coordinator asked twice if we should delay dinner. The photographer hovered near me, asking if we wanted to wait for family portraits. Each question felt heavier than the last, like the truth was building shape around me, and I was the only one pretending it wasn't there. They had RSVP'd. Not just once. Multiple times. My mom had called me a month ago, obsessing over what color she should wear so she wouldn't clash with the bridesmaids. My dad had joked about giving a speech that would embarrass me just enough. Mark had asked if his girlfriend could come. Caleb had sent me a thumbs-up emoji the morning of the wedding. They weren't just expected. They were part of the plan. Part of my plan. And now, they were gone. Dinner came and went. Speeches were made. People laughed. Music played. I smiled when I needed to. Held Daniel's hand when it mattered. Moved through the evening like someone following choreography she hadn't learned. But there was a moment, right after our first dance, when everything slowed down. Just for a second. And I caught myself looking at that empty table again. And thinking, this isn't an accident. Daniel found me a few minutes later near the bar. You don't have to pretend with me, he said quietly. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And for a second, I almost broke. But I didn't. I just don't understand, I admitted. And that was the truth. Not anger. Not yet. Just confusion.
Heavy. Unanswered. Lingering.
That night, after the last guest left and the venue emptied out, I checked my phone again. Still nothing. No missed calls. No messages. No explanation. Just silence. And somewhere deep down, beneath the confusion, beneath the disbelief, a quieter thought began to form. One I didn't want to say out loud. One I wasn't ready to face. What if this wasn't sudden? What if I just hadn't seen it coming? I went to bed that night next to my husband, my new life beginning, while something else, something older, quietly ended. I didn't know it yet. But that silence, that absence, that empty table, that was just the beginning. 3 days into our honeymoon, I finally got the answer. Daniel and I were in Napa. The morning had been quiet, in that expensive, unreal way honeymoon mornings are supposed to feel. Sunlight across white sheets, half-finished coffee, a vineyard outside our window, looking too peaceful to belong to the same world as my family. For a while, I almost let myself believe the wedding day could be explained.
A medical emergency.
A misunderstanding. Something. Anything. Then I opened Instagram. And there they were. My mother, my father, Mark, Caleb. All 4 of them standing on a beach in Maui, wearing matching floral shirts, holding cocktails, sunburned and smiling like they had never missed anything important in their lives. My father even had his arm around Caleb. He hated pictures. But there he was, smiling. The caption read, "The family is finally whole." I didn't cry. That was the strangest part. I just stared at the screen until the words stopped looking like words. Daniel saw it before I said anything. He sat beside me slowly, his hand covering mine on the table. "Lauren." His voice broke a little around my name. That hurt more than the photo. Because he understood before I did. They hadn't missed my wedding. They had chosen something else. Worse. They had celebrated it. I sat there for a long moment, feeling something inside me go cold. Not numb.
Clear.
Very clear. "Can I use your phone?" I asked. Daniel didn't ask why. He just handed it to me. He was still in the family group chat. Apparently, removing the bride from her own family's chat had been enough for them. They hadn't thought about my husband. I opened the conversation. There were messages from Hawaii. Photos. Jokes. A toast. My mother had sent a heart emoji under the beach picture. My father had written, "Finally, some peace." I typed one sentence. "Enjoy it while it lasts." Then I sent it, and handed Daniel back his phone. He looked at the message, then at me. "What are you going to do?" I looked out toward the vineyard, where everything was green and orderly and beautiful. "I'm going to stop protecting them." That afternoon, while Daniel went to cancel our dinner reservation, I opened my laptop. Whitmore and Rowe Logistics had never really been just my father's company. That was the story he liked telling people. The version where he was the visionary, the builder, the man who turned one warehouse and 3 trucks into a regional freight operation. But the truth was messier. I had spent 6 years dragging that business into the modern world. I built the client portal. I automated the scheduling system. I landed the Walmart distribution contract after my father nearly lost it by forgetting 2 follow-up calls. I negotiated with drivers, rebuilt payroll, cleaned up vendor reporting, and created the backup server nobody else understood. And 3 years ago, after I caught a strange payment marked as fleet software maintenance, I added something my father hated. Dual authorization. Any transaction over $10,000 needed 2 signatures. Mine was one of them. He called it dramatic. I called it necessary. Now, sitting in a honeymoon suite with my wedding ring still feeling new on my hand, I logged into the company registration system. My name was everywhere.
Owner.
Partner.
Authorized officer.
Digital administrator. Emergency access contact. For years, that had meant responsibility. That day, it meant leverage. I removed my personal authorization from active operations. Transferred my shares into a legal holding pattern. Locked access to the backup server. Then I froze the payroll account. Not permanently. Not illegally. Just exactly within the authority I had as co-owner pending review of suspicious activity. Payroll was due Friday. I knew what that meant. Drivers would call. Warehouse staff would panic. Clients would ask questions. And my father, for the first time in his life, would discover how much of his empire only stood because I had been holding it up quietly. Daniel came back into the room while I was still typing. He didn't stop me. He didn't tell me to calm down. He just placed a glass of water beside my laptop and said, "Make sure whatever you do, you can defend it." I almost smiled. I already can. Because that was the other thing my family never understood. I didn't move emotionally. I moved with receipts. For years, I had saved screenshots, flagged invoices, archived emails, notes from meetings where my father waved away problems, and Caleb laughed like consequences were for other people. I hadn't done it because I planned revenge. I had done it because something in me had never fully trusted the ground beneath my feet. Now I knew why. I didn't call them. I didn't explain. I didn't beg for an apology. I let silence answer silence. A week later, my phone rang from an unknown number. I didn't answer. The voicemail was from Richard Hale, the company's CPA. His voice sounded tight. Careful. Like a man choosing every word because the room around him had suddenly filled with gasoline. He said the IRS had contacted them. There were discrepancies. Missing records. Unpaid state taxes from 2 years prior. Vendor payments that didn't line up. And without my credentials, they couldn't access half the documentation they needed. I played the voicemail twice. Then I deleted it. That evening, someone knocked on our front door. Not once. Not politely. Again and again. For nearly 20 minutes. Daniel looked at me from the kitchen. You want me to handle it? I shook my head. No. Because I already knew who it was. When I opened the door, my father was standing there, red-faced, sweating through the collar of a suit that probably cost more than my first car. His eyes didn't go to my face first. They went past me. Into the house. Like he still believed any room I occupied was one he had a right to enter. What did you do? He snapped. I leaned against the doorframe. Waited. That bothered him. He was used to me explaining myself.
Defending myself.
Trying to make peace before anyone asked for it. Not anymore. You froze payroll, he said. Do you have any idea what you've done? Yes, I said. Exactly. His jaw tightened. The drivers are threatening to walk. 2 clients are already asking about penalties. Richard can't file documents because your access is locked, and now the IRS is reviewing 5 years of returns. He stepped closer. If you don't fix this, we're all going down. That word almost made me laugh. All. Apparently, all meant the people who could make it to Hawaii. The people who could smile under a caption about the family finally being whole. The people who had removed me from a group chat on my wedding day, like deleting my name would make me easier to forget. All? I asked quietly. Funny, I didn't think I was part of that anymore. His face twitched. That wasn't personal. I stared at him. You blocked me from the family chat during my wedding. It was a bad time. We needed space. You needed space from my wedding? For the first time, he had nothing to say. Only for a second. Then anger rushed back in to save him. You're acting like a child, he said. You're risking everything we built because your feelings got hurt. My feelings didn't freeze the account, I said. Suspicious transactions did. His expression changed. Not much, but enough. A flicker. There it was. Fear. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. Then he threw it down between us. It landed on the floor near my feet.
A partnership clause.
3 years old. Buried in paperwork from when I officially became co-owner. He had partial override rights under specific conditions.
Negligence.
Intentional harm.
Sabotage.
He wanted to claim I had attacked the company. That I had acted out of malice. That I was unstable. For 1 second, I felt the old version of myself rise up. The daughter trained to panic when her father sounded disappointed. Then I looked at the paper. And stepped over it. You should be careful with that, I said. Discovery works both ways. His mouth opened.
Closed.
He hadn't expected that. You think you can threaten me? He asked. No, I said. I think you just threatened yourself. By Monday, his lawyer sent a cease and desist. By Tuesday, my lawyer replied with a timeline of every questionable financial decision I had flagged over 6 years. Invoices.
Approvals.
Vendor complaints. Tax warnings. Screenshots. By Wednesday, my mother texted me for the first time in 2 months. Can we please talk? This is getting out of hand. No apology. No explanation. Just panic dressed up as concern. I didn't respond. Because by Thursday, Richard called again. This time, I answered. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "Lauren," he said, voice low, "this is worse than payroll." I stood in the hallway, one hand against the wall. "What happened?" A pause. Then he said the IRS wasn't only looking at the company. They were looking at my father personally.
Offshore accounts.
A fake vendor.
A shell entity.
And something tied to Caleb. The room seemed to narrow around me. Richard kept talking, but I barely heard him after that. Because suddenly, all the little things made sense. Caleb's vague role. The vendor payments Dad never wanted me reviewing. The strange tension whenever I asked for supporting documents. The way my family hadn't just abandoned me. They had removed me right before everything began to surface. I ended the call and sat at the kitchen table. Daniel found me there. "What is it?" I looked at him, and for the first time since the wedding, I felt something close to grief. Not because they had hurt me, but because I was beginning to understand how long they had been lying. "We're past fixing it," I said. That night, my phone lit up with a message from Aunt Jody. "Your dad is spiraling. Caleb hasn't slept. Your mom is terrified. What is going on?" I stared at it for a long time. Then I turned the phone face down. Outside, the house was quiet. Inside, something enormous had begun to move. And this time, I wasn't standing in front of it to protect them. The call that changed everything came the next afternoon. Daniel and I were sitting at the dining table, half surrounded by unopened wedding gifts and thank you cards we hadn't finished writing. For the first time since the wedding, things almost felt normal. We were arguing, lightly, about whose handwriting looked worse. Mine, obviously. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Something told me not to. I stepped into the hallway and answered. "Lauren Whitmore?" "Yes?" "It's Richard." His voice sounded different this time. Lower, more controlled. Like someone trying not to panic. "You need to hear this before anyone else tells you their version." My grip tightened on the phone. "Tell me." A pause, then, "When you froze payroll, it interrupted a transfer. A large one." My chest went still. "What kind of transfer?" Another pause. "The kind that gets flagged by a bank's compliance department." I didn't say anything. I just listened. "The account it was going to," he continued, "was listed under a vendor. Fleet Software Maintenance." My stomach dropped. I knew that vendor. Or at least, I thought I did. "We tried verifying it," he said. "There's no actual company. The address is a mailbox in Nevada." I closed my eyes. "And the owner?" I asked quietly. Silence. Then, "It traces back to Caleb." Everything clicked. Not all at once, not like a revelation, more like puzzle pieces finally admitting they had always belonged together. Caleb's vague role in the company, the way he floated between departments without responsibility, the way my father always brushed off my questions when Caleb signed off on anything. I leaned against the wall. "How bad is it?" I asked. Richard exhaled slowly. "They've escalated it to a criminal investigation." I didn't move. "They're not just looking at that one vendor," he continued. "They're digging into 5 years of records." 5 years. 5 years of transactions. 5 years of decisions my name had been attached to. "Lauren," his voice softened just slightly, "your digital signature appears on several documents tied to those payments." My heart didn't race. It didn't even skip. It just sank. "I didn't sign those," I said. "I believe you," he replied quickly. "But you need to understand how this looks from the outside." I did. Too well. My father hadn't just been hiding things. He had been using me. My access, my credibility, my name. I hung up slowly and stood there for a long time, staring at nothing. Daniel found me a few minutes later. He didn't ask immediately. He just waited. That was his way. When I finally spoke, my voice sounded distant, even to me. "They used my signature." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "They forged approvals, transactions, vendor payments." I let out a quiet breath. "If this goes the wrong way, it won't just be them." His expression sharpened. "Do you have proof?" I nodded. "I have everything." Because of course I did. The backup server, the one I insisted on setting up. Every email, every invoice, every approval log, every timestamp. Stored, archived, untouched, and locked behind a password only I had. I walked past him into the office and opened my laptop. Daniel followed, but didn't interrupt. He watched, as I logged in, as I navigated through folders no one else in my family even knew existed, as I verified what I already suspected. There they were. Altered invoices, duplicated approvals, payment splits designed to stay under reporting thresholds, and my signature, placed neatly at the bottom of documents I had never seen. I sat back in the chair. Not shocked. Not anymore. Just done. I could walk away, I said quietly. Daniel didn't respond. I could let it collapse without me. Still nothing. And they'd take me down with them. That's when he spoke. Then don't walk away blind. I looked at him. He held my gaze. Walk away with control. That night, I locked the backup system. Not deleted, not altered, just sealed. No one could access it. Not my father, not Caleb, not even their lawyers. Without me, the truth stayed buried. But it also stayed safe, untouched, intact, waiting. The next message came from Aunt Jody again. Your dad hasn't left the office in 2 days. Caleb's not answering calls. Your mom keeps saying this will pass. I stared at the message, then set the phone down. For the first time, it didn't make me feel anything. At 9:12 p.m., there was a knock at the door. I didn't need to check. I already knew. When I opened it, my father looked worse than before. Same suit, same shoes, but something had cracked beneath the surface. He didn't ask to come in, didn't try to push past me. He just shoved a thick envelope into my hands. Read it, he said. You're not as clean as you think. I opened it slowly. Inside, printed emails, old ones, 2 years ago. A logistics contract I remembered clearly, my name on the approval line. I frowned. I signed a standard delivery quote, I said. He stepped closer. But the invoice changed after that. I looked up. You changed it. He didn't deny it. He leaned in instead. If the IRS sees those emails out of context, they won't just come after me. There it was. Not anger, not even desperation. Strategy. He still thought he could control this. Still thought fear would bring me back into line. They'll come after you too, he finished. I held his gaze. Didn't blink. Good luck with that. For the first time, he hesitated. Just for a second. Then he shifted tactics. If you come back now, he said softer, we can fix this. I almost laughed. We. It's still a family business, he continued. We made a mistake with the wedding, but we can move past it. That was it. That was all he had. One vague acknowledgement. One careless attempt to rewrite what they had done. Like skipping my wedding was a scheduling error, not a choice. You don't get to decide when we move past it, I said quietly. His jaw tightened. You're burning everything. I shook my head. No. I stepped back slightly, creating just enough distance to make a point. You burned it, I said. I just stopped putting it out. He stood there, silent, like he was searching for something else to say. Something that would still work. It didn't come. After a moment, he turned, walked down the driveway, and didn't look back. I closed the door, locked it. Not because I was afraid, but because I was finished opening it. The next morning, an email came through from the company's former legal counsel. Subject line, urgent, share liquidation attempt. My father was trying to sell off portions of the company, fast, desperate. A panic move to raise cash. But he couldn't. Because my name was still tied to everything. Assets, contracts, ownership structure, and now, the investigation. By Friday, something else happened, something none of them expected. The IRS didn't just freeze the company accounts. They froze the personal ones, too. My father, my mother, Caleb. All flagged, all locked. No withdrawals, no transfers, nothing. Daniel and I were having dinner when the alert came through. I read it once, then again. Then I set my fork down slowly and leaned back in my chair. Daniel watched me carefully. "Well?" he asked. I exhaled, a long, steady breath. "It's done," I said. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't. Because the next morning, my phone exploded. 33 missed calls. 9 from my father, 10 from my mother. The rest from Mark and Caleb. Not a single voicemail, just silence. Panic without words. At noon, 2 emails came in from the IRS. Formal requests. They wanted the backup records. Emails, contracts, vendor logs, everything only I could access. I stared at the screen, finger hovering over the keyboard. For a moment, I did nothing. Not out of hesitation, out of control. Because for the first time in my life, they were waiting on me. That evening, there was another knock at the door. Softer this time. Daniel checked the peephole, then looked back at me. "It's your mom." I stood still for a second, then nodded. "Let her in." She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just diminished. Like the version of herself she had always played. Quiet, agreeable, untouched by conflict, was finally cracking. "Lauren," she said softly. I didn't answer. We sat down across from each other. Silence stretched between us. Then she started talking. Fast. Rehearsed. She said she didn't know everything. That she hadn't agreed to miss the wedding. That my father had convinced her it would be better that way. Less tension. She said she tried to call. I didn't respond. I just watched her. Because I had seen the photo. The smiles. The caption. She shifted. Changed direction. "They froze everything," she said. "We can't access any accounts. The mortgage, the credit cards, even groceries." "That sounds difficult," I said. Her eyes filled with something sharp. Desperation. "Your father is falling apart," she continued. "Caleb had a breakdown. If you don't help, everything we built—" "What you built?" I interrupted. She flinched. Then, she said the one thing she shouldn't have. "We know about the emergency fund." My blood went cold. That account was private. Separate. Untouched by the business. "How?" I asked. She hesitated. "Your father pulled old banking records. From when you still had joint authorization." "Of course he did." "He thinks that money should go back into the business," she added. I stood up. Slowly. "That money has nothing to do with you," I said. "You wouldn't have it without the company." "I wouldn't have it without me," I cut in. She stood too, hands shaking now. "Please," she whispered. Then, her final card. "If you don't help, your father will go public. He'll say you manipulated the books, that you caused this." I laughed. Actually laughed. And she flinched like I had slapped her. "They're drowning," I said, "and they still think they can drag me under with them." I stepped back toward the hallway. "I'm not stopping anything." Her face went pale. "I haven't sent the files yet," I added. "Not because I'm protecting you." I met her eyes. "I just wanted to see how far you'd fall." She stared at me, like she didn't recognize who I had become. Then she turned and left. The next morning, I sent everything. Every file, every record, every piece of truth they thought they had buried. Then I closed my laptop, looked at Daniel, and said, "Let's go get brunch." Because whatever happened next was no longer mine to carry. And this time, I wasn't looking back. 3 days after I sent the files, it stopped being a family problem and started becoming a public one. Daniel was the one who saw it first. We were sitting on the couch, half watching something neither of us was really paying attention to, when his phone buzzed. He frowned slightly, then looked at me. "You might want to see this." I took his phone. And there it was. A local news headline. "Family-owned logistics firm under federal investigation for multi-year tax fraud." No names. Not officially. But anyone who knew Whitmore and Rowe could connect the dots. I read it once, then again, then handed the phone back. I didn't feel triumph or relief, just stillness, like something loud had finally gone quiet. The messages started almost immediately. Old coworkers, clients, a few distant relatives who suddenly remembered I existed. Some were shocked. Some were not. I always thought something was off. "You did the right thing. Are you okay?" I didn't respond to most of them. I didn't need to. That night, my father sent the last message I would ever read from him. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't even personal. It was a screenshot.
A legal letter. Formal.
Cold. Accusing me of breaching fiduciary duty.
Damaging the company.
Causing financial and emotional harm. Threatening a civil lawsuit if I didn't retract my statements and cooperate. I read it carefully. Every word. Then I blocked his number. No hesitation. No second thought. A few hours later, Mark called. I didn't answer. But he left a voicemail this time. His voice sounded strained.
Tight.
"You've gone too far," he said. "This should have been handled inside the family." I almost smiled. Because suddenly, everyone believed in family conversations. Just not on my wedding day. Caleb emailed me next. Short. Carefully worded. He said I had misunderstood things. That we could have talked. That it didn't have to go this way. I didn't reply. Because I had already tried talking. For years. They just hadn't been listening. The next morning, I logged into the company portal. One of the last systems still tied to my name. My profile was still there.
Owner. Administrator.
Every role I had spent years building. I hovered over the settings for a moment. Not out of doubt. Out of acknowledgement. Then I deleted everything. My name. My email. My access. Gone. Not as revenge. Not even as closure. Just removal. 3 months later, Daniel and I moved. Out of state. New town. New house. No shared history in the walls. No ghosts in the corners. Just quiet. The kind that feels earned. I didn't touch the emergency fund. We didn't need to. I started consulting privately again. Small contracts. Selective clients. No partnerships. No shared control. Daniel went back to teaching. We built something slower this time. More deliberate. More honest. A few people stayed in my life. Aunt Jody. A couple of cousins who had always kept their distance from the business. Some friends from the wedding. They still talked about it sometimes. The story. The scandal. How my family chose a vacation over my wedding. How everything collapsed afterward. Everyone had an opinion. Most of them agreed on one thing. People like that only care about control. And when they lose it, they lose everything. It's been almost a year now. Every once in a while, a letter shows up. From a law firm. From a distant relative. From someone trying to reconnect like nothing happened. I don't open them. I don't need to. Daniel and I have a routine now. Morning coffee. Evening walks. Weekend trips when we feel like it. We laugh more. Talk more. Live lighter. Sometimes we talk about kids. Not in a rushed way. Just as a possibility. A future that feels safe enough to imagine. People still ask me if I miss them. My family. I always tell the truth. I miss the version of them I thought they were. And that's enough. Because that version never showed up. Not when it mattered. And now, neither do I. I thought that was the end. I really did. Until 6 days later, when I got an email that made everything stop again. It was from the IRS. Not a notice. Not a request. A thank you.
Formal. Direct.
One of the senior agents acknowledged the records I provided, said they had uncovered multiple offshore accounts tied to fraudulent vendor payments. Not just under my father's name. Others, too. People I recognized. People who had smiled at me across conference tables years ago. 2 of them had already left the country. But the email ended with something I hadn't expected. We will be issuing a subpoena for testimony. I read that line twice. Then a third time. This wasn't just about my family anymore. This was bigger. Much bigger. Later that afternoon, Daniel brought in the mail. There was a thick envelope. No return address. No stamp. Hand-delivered. That alone made something tighten in my chest. I opened it carefully. Inside. A letter. And a flash drive. The letter was from Caleb. His handwriting looked rushed.
Uneven.
Like someone trying to get everything out before they lost the chance. He said Dad had gone too far. That things were out of control. That he had been pressured into setting up the fake vendors. That Mom knew more than she ever admitted. That he didn't want to go down with them. There were parts that sounded like apologies. Parts that sounded like excuses. And parts that sounded like fear. At the end, one line stood out. If this helps balance things out, maybe one day you'll understand. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I picked up the flash drive. I didn't use my main laptop. I wasn't careless. I plugged it into an old one. Opened the files. And what I saw was everything. Emails. Voice memos. Spreadsheets.
Transaction breakdowns.
Even video recordings. One clip froze me in place. My father. On a call.
Laughing.
Talking to someone I didn't recognize. The kid signs whatever I put in front of her. The kid. That was me. Another clip showed him explaining to Caleb how to split vendor payments into smaller amounts. To stay under the radar, he said. It was precise.
Deliberate.
Careful. Not mistakes. Not misunderstandings.
A system.
I didn't hesitate. I forwarded everything to the IRS contact. With one line. One more thing you should see. That night, Daniel and I sat on the porch. The air was cooler than usual. The kind that settles around you instead of passing through. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Because for the first time since the wedding, since the messages, since the silence and the lies, I understood something clearly. This wasn't revenge. Not anymore. It wasn't even about justice. It was about removal. Cutting out everything that had twisted something good into something painful. Everything that had taken what should have been the best day of my life and tried to erase me from it. Now, there was nothing left to erase. Just a quiet life. A real one. Built without them. And this time, it was finally over.